Okay, and we are recording for the Esoteric Book Club on chapter 16, Distillation, from the Emerald Tablet, Alchemy for Personal Transformation by Dennis William Hawk. So first we're going to start out with the astrology for now and what's going on, and then we'll get into the distillation chapter and talk about the symbols and the keywords that Dennis William Hawk wrote about for distillation, and then talk about experiences with distillation, recap the whole alchemical process, end it with coagulation, and then be gone. So just share my screen. So for the sky now, I have it at this exact moment. The sun is at 29 degrees Leo, and fascinatingly, it syncs up with the distillation chapter, having the sun move into Virgo tonight at around 3 or 4 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, because distillation is associated with the sign of Virgo, which is the purifying and analytical process of distillation. Also, interestingly, Mercury rules Virgo, and Mercury is a strong part of the distillation process. The mercurial fluid feminine state of Mercury is associated with Virgo. So we're applying towards a square, or the moon is applying to a square with the sun currently. It'll happen in a couple of hours, and that would be a fixed square, which is typically pretty frustrating and doesn't allow for a lot of change, but more so a feeling of rigidity and wanting to stay in place or stick it out or be a little stubborn, not really move a whole lot. But with the square happening, it manifests as a feeling of needing to. So the reaction with the fixed square is to stay put, feeling like there is outside tension to make you move. Because squares oftentimes are internal frustrations manifest externally, and oppositions are external frustrations that we need to balance within ourselves. And so with the moon coming up to a square, we'll be feeling tension inside as a reaction to have to change but not wanting to. Let's see, what else do we have? We have Mars and Venus conjunct in Virgo, which is they're heading our pathway into Virgo. Let's see exactly when that happens tonight, when the sun moves in. It'll be at 3-ish a.m. Yeah, around 3 a.m. tonight. And that'll start the last third of the summer season. The Virgo part of the season for us on the Western Hemisphere or on the Northern Hemisphere, is the kind of the culmination of summer, the culmination of crops. We start to see results for the work that we've been doing throughout the summer. Virgo is highly associated with crop yields. So a lot of instances, situations, issues, what have you, with agriculture will be a big theme, just politically, culturally, and on a worldwide scale. There will be a lot of focus on, of course, the crops of the world happening. And I think if you guys are following, there's a big topic of conversation currently with China going on, with starting contracts with Russia to start buying their wheat and soy crops from Russia rather than America. So there's going to be a lot of political stuff going on in terms of agriculture, not to mention we have a horrifying fire going on in the Amazon, which is due to man-made agricultural poor decisions. And with this Virgo cycle, we'll be really heavily focusing on agriculture, our relationship to it, how we can make it better, refining the details of that. Uranus is in Taurus also to help promote this. Uranus and Taurus is what are the alternative ways that we can do this that we haven't thought of yet? What are the radical ways that we can solve these problems now? And what are the big cultural shifts that we need to make towards sustaining the environment and having a more equal balance between human consumption and, you know, world markets and world trade. That's the year that Uranus will be making a nice trine to the upcoming stellium in Virgo with the Sun, Venus, and Mars. And so hopefully we'll be seeing kind of probably from the younger generation more radical solutions to environmental problems. I actually just bought a whole haul from Amazon. Horribly, yes, I know, but I mean, I live in the desert, so I kind of have to order from Amazon to get things, which is it is what it is. But you know, I got like reusable straws, reusable nets, like little net bags for produce when I go to the grocery store, compost pails, just things that can be reused in order to hopefully start walking away from plastics and one-time use containers. Let's see. Jupiter's direct now. Yay. I've been waiting for that for a long time. So I feel like the general attitude is a bit more optimistic, even though we do have a lot of crazy shit going on in the world. With Jupiter going direct in its own sign, there is a sense of like expansion. Okay, how are we going to solve this problem? What are the ways we can think about this? Let's expand our awareness and move beyond a limited view that is self-serving, that works for the whole or the benefit of the whole. Yeah, that's what I've got so far. Anyone want to add anything? No? Okay.
No, I feel like that's good. I'm excited to talk about distillation in relation to Virgo. I just like that we're talking about that.
Yeah. Yeah, so distillation, now moving over to the book. Distillation is, well, at the very end of the chapter, Dennis William Hawke says how it is associated with the sign Virgo. Let's see. So let's say the Egyptians associated their mother goddess Isis with this sign, with the Virgo sign, and her theme of changing from a childlike state to a wiser, individualized state was represented by the ripening of crops. The quest of Virgo persons is for meaningful service, and they are therefore closely allied with Hermes. Those born under this earth sign like things in order, sometimes worrying too much and have a tendency toward licentiousness, but consciousness is their redeeming trait, and they have an amazingly unselfish sense of service to others. They also tend to be precise and analytical, seeking to know and understand everything. So the I guess I don't quite fully understand the connection to distillation with Virgo yet at the moment, but the first picture that I brought up to show it for the slide is the pelican that is talked about in the distillation chapter, because the pelican is a strong representation for the distillation process. And actually the connection that the pelican has to Virgo in the description in this chapter makes a lot of sense, because the pelican, this picture shows the mother pulling her feathers out in order to feed her young. And so she is undyingly of service to uphold the next generation, to feed and sustain the next batch of life. The pelican is, let's see, one of the signs that is like this animal it's interesting actually. Oh my god, I just remembered a dream that I had. Oh my god. It was a baby pelican. I remember, okay, so I had a dream about a baby pelican sitting on the back of a chair outside on a patio. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's a baby pelican. What is that doing here? And I opened up the glass door and I walked out, and as I was sitting down, it was like everything all meshed together, all as one, and everything was understood in that moment. As I was kneeling down, the pelican psychically communicated to me, you have to, you as in humanity, have to take care of the earth. And that was its message as I was kneeling down. And it was like I understood that message, and then I knelt down to show respect to the baby pelican and to be a symbol of, I guess, devout learning, like being receptive of the knowledge. And this image is like bringing it all together. That's really crazy. So let's see, the pelican. Do you guys know much about why the pelican is associated with this? I just read this, but I'm like drawing a blank.
I mean, they were talking about the container that is represented within the pelican in the book, from what I remember. Like the pelican, okay, so it says, one of the most popular of the medieval distillation devices was nicknamed the Pelican, a glass retort with two tubes connecting the neck with the body. The result is a reflux still in which the mixture is boiled and vapors condense in the neck, then flow back into the retort through the tubes. This circulatory process produced a very pure essence from the original mixture. And alchemical drawings depicting this operation, the pelican bird is usually shown pecking herself in her chest in order to feed her young, which are usually gathered at her feet, lapping up her fresh blood. Like the pelican, the alchemist must nourish the spiritual child with his own soul by surrendering his old self. Like the blood of Christ, this represents an act of redemption through sacrifice, and what is sacrificed at this point is the alchemist's earthly nature, his dearly held emotions and ego-centered beliefs. This can be an extremely painful process indeed. In alchemical lore, the process of distillation was invented by Maria Prophetessa, the Jewish alchemist and female counterpart of Hermes. She is said to have invented and tested scores of distillation vessels, including the Pelican retort. An enigmatic saying of Maria Prophetessa, known as Maria's cry, is said to summarize the universal distillation in terms of the number of its components. One becomes two, two becomes three, and out of the third comes the one as the fourth.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yes. So Maria Prophetessa is the female counterpart to Hermes, and is she also connected to, like, you know, if this were translated in like the Christian myth, then Mary, probably? like Mary and Jesus, the male female Christian manifestation of that. That's not really a question. I guess it's just a thought. So the Maria's cry, 1 becomes 2, 2 becomes 3, and out of the 3rd comes the 1 as the 4th. So it feels like we have been going through this process, essentially, where one individual is what we started out with, which is our egoic selves, split off into 2 during the separation phase when we became aware of the fact that we were an egoic self. And then once we understood that and worked towards burning off the ego, then 2 became 3, where we had created our higher self image of who we are. So then there was like a 3rd person in the room during that. And then out of the 3rd, which is the higher self image that we had of ourselves, comes the 1 as the 4th. So then we like burn that away, and in the last process create our over self, which is connected to source, versus our own egoic identification of who we are as a person. So let's see, I have a picture. So here's a picture of the Pelican vessel that they're talking about. This one is a double. I think there's one that only has one side. So if you can imagine one of them not there and then not connecting into the other, this tube would go down, I think, into itself. But this is a double, so they can, I guess, distill 2 different substances and then like mix them. So that gets even more complicated. And so the bottom part is where the substance goes, and then during the burning process, the vapors go up and collect into the ball. And then once the vapors get heavy enough, they drop back down, and that's the distilled essence. And then it just keeps going, circulating over and over and over again until you have the most pure essence of a thing, which is also how perfume is made and how a lot of things are made, like alcohol, which is why also there are still so many like monks and priests who specialize in liqueurs. Saint Germain, Chartreuse are 2 liqueurs that are distilled by monks that have their own very secret process of doing that. They would be considered alchemists. So the symbols for the distillation process. Here's another image of the pelican eating itself and feeding itself so it's young. Oh yeah, I love that quote, that the alchemist must nourish the spiritual child with its own soul by surrendering his old self. And that makes so much sense for this whole process that we've been going through, because the old self goes somewhere, right? We talk about as occultists to let go, or witches really, during the full moon, to let go of what does not serve you. Like let go, let it go, let it fall off. But where does it go? Where do you put it? What is that thing that's falling off from you? But it's something that you still utilize for your own self. Like the quote says, you feed your spiritual child with that old self in order to grow and become bigger and stronger. So you use it as nourishment. The dross, the old that you throw away, it's something that you utilize. You bring it back into yourself and evolve through it. Also, it's a Christ analogy too, feeding of the self, feeding of the body to the followers. Yeah. So the psychological person who's distilled shows an excessive amount of peace and well-being. She also says that someone who's distilled may come off as cold or emotionally unattached or even amoral at times because of the fact that there's a disconnect to earthly, societal, political experiences. The identity to political connections is gone. The identity to cultural connections are gone for the most part. And what's left is the true essence of the self. And so it comes off as someone who maybe is stoic, maybe doesn't laugh at everything, seems, to be not crying in a very emotional moment, has somewhat of a detached, like, third person experience. The distillation process, what I've come to experience and understand, is that it's really learning how to live between worlds. Because when we distill something, the vapor that rises from the water that's burning is, you can't contain it. You can't hold it. You can't touch it. It's hot. It'll burn you. But you can only see it. And so the visualization meditation that we did, which was to burn the liquid that we had with our old selves in it, and then gaze into the vapors. And by doing this, while you're creatively visualizing with your eyes open, kind of creating an open door, or opening the door, or allowing your conscious self to experience the veil and create visually with your eyes open and conscious, versus what we normally do and what people normally do, which is totally fine and just different, is close your eyes when you're doing visualizations, because it's usually a lot easier to do that when you have a blank state or a blank slate in your mind. But the distillation process has taught me to learn how to penetrate the boundary of your conscious self, your conscious eyes, and to marry the other realm and this realm together, so that you are kind of walking, as I guess magical practitioners would say, the middle path, or the getting centered within yourself through the middle pillar. Some of the cards that he says represent this process is the High Priestess, and I think I got my card mixed up. I have the Hierophant, but it's probably the...
That's right.
It is? Because for some reason
it's the Hierophant and the High Priestess.
Okay. Which they both are seen with veils essentially around them, of some sort, or existing within a veil. So you can see them clearly. They have a shape, but they also are a part of another kind of fabric over them, or another pattern that exists alongside them, on them, next to them, within them, outside of them, like all of that. The High Priestess is, she has the crown, the moon goddess crown on her head, and is holding this fabric that is like a net, or of the veil. And then she has all of the fruits of the labor underneath, or the material realm underneath. And it really brought to me the image that he explained or expressed during his experience with distillation, of going up into this space of light and lightness and oneness with all, and then looking down and experiencing matter as a very heavy and dense place, but with a lot of shape and boundaries and limitations, which is not a bad or a good thing. It just is what it is. And so I think this card represents very well that dichotomy between existing in a material realm, but then also having a connection to the other side, the ethereal, magical, imaginative, intuitive space. The Hierophant would be the masculine version of that, which is the sulfuric healing properties of distillation. With sulfur, or the masculine aspects of distillation, we are able to actively heal through the process. And then he says that the Tower card is representative of the body during the process of distillation, and that this is supposed to be temperance in other decks, but it's the Art card in the Thoth deck. The Art card represents the Virgoan nature of distillation, which is the patience that is required in order to go through the processes. The Art card or the Temperance card requires temperance, to temper the two different, the heat and the water, to create a balance between the two. Let's see. He's got a cloak that has a rainbow on it that I just noticed. And rainbows are also another symbol for distillation, along with the Edelweiss flower. Let's see. Oh, I have that. The Edelweiss flower, snow, rainbows, the lotus flower, rose petals. In terms of animals, it's associated with the winged serpents, white doves, owls, pelicans, soaring birds, serpent on the cross, green lion eating the sun. And this is the green lion eating the sun. Another green lion eating the sun on what may be a lotus unfolding. And the dreams and distillation that you can have, or during your distillation process, is flying, climbing on top of a mountain, escalators, elevators, confronting mountain lions, eagles, releasing caged birds, walking deserted streets. So, let's see. So he says that distillation takes place on all three levels of the human, which is the spirit, mind, and body. So I don't know about you guys, but during this whole process, while I was reading the chapter, I was trying to relate any past experiences or psychological processes I was having in terms of distillation and just syncing the experiences up together. And for me, I'm really starting to feel the distillation process happening and acknowledge it. And it's only due to the fact that we've been doing rigorous conscious work to connect with our subconscious. And I feel like it's something that people usually will react against very easily and very quickly as a habitual pattern. Let's just say one really obvious example, especially in our day and age right now, is I want to stop sharing really quick. Especially in our day and age at the moment, is political. So people get triggered really easily with political dialogue. And a lot of times it's a reactive triggering where they'll just, from their physical self, react to the trigger in the habitual way. Like, you know, very heated topics like abortion, for example, or like financial like aid or Social Security or Medicare, things like that. They have a very strong reaction to it, and like they already have a definitive answer to why it's wrong or why it's right. And without having a more like like balanced approach that's not emotional based in any way. Anger wouldn't be necessary to as a response to a political statement. There's no need. If you feel anger rising in you based on something someone says about a political stance, that's not a distilled person. That's someone who is still reacting to the bodily sensations of an identity towards a political topic or trigger. For someone who is distilled, let's say the topic of abortion comes up, it is, well, abortion, I think, maybe a little bit more deeper because it has a lot more to do with like the continuation of humanity, like from a very direct way, but it involves a lot of people. But something like, I don't know, Medicare is something that's, you know, Medicare for all or health insurance. You know, the argument is, well, I don't want to pay for everybody. Why should I pay for everyone? That's a lot. That's like the biggest argument from the opposition to a like healthcare, a global healthcare system for this country. The first statement is, I don't want to pay, or why should I have to pay? And that's a very like egoic place to come from in terms of considering any sort of political structure, since the political structure is not I in any way, shape, or form, but is a governing of millions of people. So it's the I is inserting itself into the topic, when the I really has no place for that. But I mean, that's just off the top of my head. I'm sure there's a way better example for that maybe makes more sense, but I hope that helped. So in Dennis's experience with distillation, he brings up his shamanic experience. His friend was with him and asked him a series of questions while he was going through a trip. He seemed very coherent, and they dictated the whole exchange, and it's all in the book, the Q&A. And so he explains this whole process of merging with the herb, merging with the plant essence, having it kind of take over his physical being, and then having this existential experience from it, and then the battle that happens between the ego and the will and the soul in order to separate from the identity of being an individual self, which seemed to be the hardest part of the process for him in the very beginning, really letting go of his identity and allowing the plant or the herb to fully engulf his being and kind of take over and allow him to exit the third dimensional realm, or the mundane realm, or the heavy space that we exist in that's ruled by gravity. So one part that stuck out to me was in the very beginning, where he says there's a really terrible sense of foreboding, like something is coming for me. I'm actually trembling. These aren't chills, but tremors deep in the body that spread from neck to foot. I wasn't expecting them. Does this happen to everyone? that terrible sense of foreboding, like something horrible is going to happen. I wonder if everyone's had this before, but I definitely have had this experience multiple times, just out of nowhere, where for no reason you just feel like something horrible is going to happen. And that's your ego saying something horrible is going to happen to me, to the self. And it's a horrible thing because the ego doesn't want to not exist anymore. But if we attach ourselves to the ego identity, then yes, it is a horrible experience that's about to happen, thus creating a path where you can go down a very negative loop with an altered state, or relinquishing control, allowing the self to dissolve, and then going into the altered state where you're rising above the foreboding sense of doom. So he says that there were waves that came in. It was like a wave. The plant that he took, what was it? It was a blend of mushrooms. The local herbs allowed one to pass through what they called the nirika, which is the barrier between ordinary and non-ordinary realities. And so he was able to experience that barrier, the space in between, in a conscious state, which is what the visualization meditation was. We were hoping to attain, or attempt to, or just even start to attain, get an inkling of that with the meditation that we did. So he broke the barrier and he went like way off. I know it's beyond my own imagination because I can't imagine things like this. I have a good imagination, but this is ridiculous. These things get their life from something else. And so he had a sense that he was not a part of what he was seeing. It was something that he was experiencing firsthand, therefore not being of his own imagination. And we talked about this last time when we had our own first experiences with connecting with an altered space or an entity or something other than yourself, and knowing that it didn't come from you, but that you are connecting with an altered thing. That's what he was talking about right there. I don't know how to describe it. For starts, these colors have texture. So in his trip, he saw the above and the below very distinctly. And when he described the below, he says, these demons are all about us, that ugly part that got blown away in me. It's just light and darkness, two sides to the same coin. I am not afraid because I saw how they flow into each other. That is where our problem is, that we see a difference because somehow in our minds, we automatically attach good or bad to everything. Don't get caught up in the illusion that something above is good or something below is bad. That's not right. That's way off. So this like love and light and all high vibe energy and like ignoring anything else and getting away from the shadow, releasing the shadow, releasing, let go. That's not the case, because the shadow that we are to release or let go is what we are to feed ourselves. Puppy. Is that Bam Bam or Bruce?
It's Bruce.
Oh, okay.
He's very needy right now. Bruce.
Oh.
Yeah.
Cute. So the light and dark, black and white, good and bad, these are, part of, that's the principle of duality. Polarity exists. It is something that happens, but we don't need to attach a judgment to it. And the distillation process is supposed to help us to detach from judgment, to detach from something that's morally right or morally wrong, because all exists and all is right. If it exists, it is right. If it exists, it is because it does. It is because it is. And so going back to the morality issue and politics and cultural stances, you know, like what is morally right in a cultural sense? You know, the culture that you grew up with from a young age may have helped you or allowed you to navigate the reality that you were living in, but does it fully allow you to grow now? Or is it creating structures or barriers for your being at this moment? And if so, then the distillation process is where you would start to dissolve those boundaries and barriers that were created before, which again, it's not wrong, it's not bad, it's something that existed because you needed to use it when you did. But identifying where it is holding you back is being an aware person. And so let's see. Oh, and then he also talks about the mind and how it automatically is generating or creating the reality it lives in on a constant, instant basis. So like dreams, it's a good example. When you're in your dream state, whenever you even have a feeling or an inkling or a thought of something, it automatically shifts and changes. So we all, you know, we have dreams and moments where in our dreams where we go from one phase to the next. You're explaining, oh, I was walking down the street in my dream, and then all of a sudden there was a big elephant that appeared. Like that's how the mind manifests itself. It's instantaneous, which is why things like mantras are great, or we are taught to use mantras and for self-defense or protection spells, because you can do those instantaneously and it works. It helps it manifest if it is for your better higher self, and if it is for your ultimate path, then it will be. And he says, here you just think and bam, it's over. You're already there. I do know for sure that movement follows thought in here. So movement happens due to thought, rather than we're here in our third dimensional space. We can move first before thinking, which is what happens a lot. We do that often. Inside here, things are so fluid, it's important to stay encapsulated, he states. And that goes along with this concept of the vessel, creating the vessel, and the idea of what the container will be, because in this realm that we live in, we need vessels. We have shape, we have form, which is like the bottom portion of the priestess card. This is the below and this is the above. In the below we have all of these different shapes that are manifest from the above. That's art and that's creation and that's beauty. So it's not bad. They're all great things. It's creation. So he says also keeping a center is important in this space, being able to stay centered, being able to remain as a point in existence, which would be the point inside the circle, or the symbol glyph for the sun, which is your will. Staying centered is one thing that he emphasizes a lot. You can actually see how the negative flows into the positive down below and turns into these solid images. And I can see it happening. You can't say that matter or the body is evil because it all eventually flows into the light, and you can see its inherent innocence. We talk about devils, angels, and gods on the outside, and they're all our images with their own kind of reality. But you put them next to this stuff in here, and wow, You just know that this is where it is at, and as far as thoughts and feelings are concerned. So we create our own demons and our own reality, and of course that can be controversial when we talk about disparity and pain and suffering that people experience, which we deem as not fair for people to have to experience pain and suffering. You know, that's one of the big, I think, arguments that maybe has been eloquently philosophized by now. However, I still think for me personally, it's something that I'm coming to terms with, in terms of like, your demons are you, and then there's still people suffering, not at the hands of themselves, but at the hands of the higher power or authority that they rely on. In different parts of the world where we're born into instances where there's poverty, where we're born into instances where there's lack of food, because there is an imbalance in the world where there is the authority and power taken away by a higher echelon who has placed power on a monetary gain. And it's an illusion and it's not real. And therefore a bunch of people have to suffer because of it. But that's a whole other spiral. So he also gets in, genetics and other garbage. I really liked when he said that. What is so tragic there? And it's tragic because people are only connected to this part of the process and are not free to travel vertically. They can travel only horizontally down here. And he's talking about where we are now. They can travel only horizontally down here, which would be the linear timeline path from point A to point B. I can only see these non-crystalline structures down here, genetics and other garbage. Not garbage, but not as beautiful as the other stuff. My trait in here is awareness, and I'm aware of the dark heaviness in people and in my outside self. It's all heavy and dark, but it goes through this unspeakable process in that river, and it all changes. The people who die and don't understand, I feel a wave of great sympathy for them and cherish them. I am in here in this eternal moment watching this great tragedy in people. I can see how different we all are and how wonderful that is, because from here there are no judgments. And without judgments, you can appreciate all 12 or godzillion of them. What I mean is our differences drive this process, and only lying, shame, and fear stop it. Of course, our species' problems are irrelevant, because if we don't succeed, something else will. But still, I feel this sense of tragedy down here, and it has to do with the sacrifice we have to make. The sacrifice being manifest in a physical form that's very limited. What he kind of concluded throughout all of this is that we're able to move the chi or the life force through us with our imaginations, through conscious meditation. I can sense the thought before the words now, and I am coming down into the body right on the edge. Before long, I won't be able to follow my thoughts upward, but I won't forget what I have seen firsthand. I'm really starting to feel the heaviness here in my body. I can feel the play of all the myriad of cells vibrating at different frequencies, but still within the spectrum of the river. These bodily frequencies are real slow. I don't mean to techno-qualify this, but if you follow these frequencies down into matter, they stop and then they change. And it is this river flowing back into itself. So I can follow it around, and after it stops, I can feel these sharp rainbows. Then these vibrations get faster, and this river is quickening the zero vibrations that come around. But that was the last time around for me. When I think now, I don't move. And alarms are sounding in my brain. The ego is recovering and knows I am gone. So he went through a very powerful experience, and having that connection with the altered state, but being conscious enough to verbalize what he was experiencing. So I want to open up the discussion with you guys on how your meditation process went. Because the two meditations that he brings up as a way to connect with distillation is the cohobation meditation and the sublimation meditation. The cohobation meditation is on page 265. And he explains it as being an operation in which the matter is frequently soaked in liquid and the moisture is subsequently removed by distillation. So that's a process of cohobation in the physical form. And that meditation is essentially moving the light around, but creating or generating friction within yourself first. So thinking of something that pisses you off and then allowing it to bubble and rise up, but then consciously working on easing that up. The sublimation is similar from what I understand. It says the fire of the wise is a state of consciousness characterized by the unyielding thought and willpower, represented as sulfur. And the sublimation meditation is on page 266. So in that it says, we attempt to raise and transmute our basest instincts and most stubborn beliefs. Alchemical sublimation is freeing the energy of passion from transformation, expressing it, and then spiritizing it. In meditation, we heat these most solidified essences of soul and body through the fire of sulfuric consciousness. As the dark, passionate matter raises to seek expression, we immediately cool it by objective consciousness and redirect it into spiritual purposes. And then the cohobation meditation is a little different though. Where did it put? Where did that go? I don't remember. Does anyone remember that one? It doesn't seem.
It's on that 265
Okay.
page. It says, relaxing in a comfortable seated position, the adept tries to feel the rising and falling currents of the mercury within. Here's the process. Start with some strong issue that has been bothering you. Try to generate as much emotional energy as you can. You're already speaking to this a bit, but that's where that one is. Bring your emotions to a boil and do not hesitate to get angry, sad, or frustrated. Try to feel how the emotions pull you down into your body in darkness. Now, using your impartial mind, distill only the facts from the situation. Try to be objective and see who was really at fault or whether it was all just an accident. Imagine the situation developing in a different way and what you could have done to change the outcome. Try to feel how distilling your experience raises you out of your body and into light. If accomplished, the distillation of emotional energy can create a highly purified spiritual force. And then it goes into the sublimation meditation.
So then the cohobation one is about acknowledging the experience, and then with your conscious mind, understanding it from a factual perspective versus an emotional one. And then with the sublimation meditation, you're actively transmuting it into a spiritualized state. So those are the two meditations, and that's something that you can do actively. It's kind of something that we did with our exercise, the one where you go to the grocery store and then you think very consciously about your thought process, or you just stay very conscious of your thought process, anything that comes up about anyone around you, and then consciously work towards understanding why that judgment came up in the first place. I think that's very similar, but the sublimation portion would be to consciously transmute that judgment into a higher or elevated energy, or use that for something rather than, you acknowledge it and then move on to the next step. And the next step is always to become, I guess, one with source, light source, transmuting. That's the part of being a magician or someone that works with the energy, is not just acknowledging it, but doing something active with that energy afterwards, to make it function for you. So then the third meditation, which is what we essentially did with when we burned or we boiled our higher self portraits in a pot and did a conscious gazing exercise. The idea was to circulate the light while you were consciously gazing at the vapors, but then also to just experience what the experience was for you in your individual practice, and how just, we're experimenting. So how did that work out for you guys? What did you do? Did you do it alone? Were you using music? Did you keep your eyes open the whole time? And if so, did you notice any shifts in your focus when you had your eyes open? Did you notice any color changes or any like fogginess or anything like protruding or popping out? How was that experience for you guys? Either one could go first. Kathleen, you go first.
Honestly, this is the chapter and the process that I think I had the least connection with. I guess I'm not distilled. I don't know. I really had a hard time with this one, like connecting with it. I really deeply connected to fermentation. But my stuff literally like was evaporated in like less than 5 minutes. It was just done. So I felt like I couldn't really like spend too long, obviously kind of gazing with the smoke, with the vapors. It was a little hard to focus, even though I had every intention I set, to kind of be present with the process. When I was doing the meditation around, kind of getting, like bringing my emotions to a boil, and then kind of watching the vapors. Like I said, everything was just over within a few minutes, and I feel like I couldn't really get too much out of it. But I kept my essential oil basically of my thing, and I also kind of scraped the bottom of my bowl to kind of have the leftover ashy matter. So I don't know what to do with that, if I should bury that or something, but so I have both things separate. But this was the one I really have nothing to share, unfortunately. I really wish that something profound happened to me, but nothing happened that is really at all worth sharing, unfortunately. The only thing that kind of happened, I guess, that I was a little conscious of was that I just felt like all of my upper chakras and my upper area of my body, like super highly awake and super tingly, but really calm at the same time. So I felt like my body was kind of like, like in that Pelican thing, like the steam was rising to like the upper part, or maybe like the upper chakras of my body. And that's really it. And I was also thinking about, because in the fermentation process, we spent like 3 weeks with that because we had to keep like rescheduling. So I spent a lot of time in that. And when I was doing that specific meditation, and I did the like and I saw this like Pelican thingy. And I kept thinking like, well, you know, if that was part of the distillation process and the Pelican retort broke, I kept thinking like, if nothing fucking happened to me during distillation, how did it break? And I actually, you know, today I feel like I finally kind of have an answer to that, like in my actual life. It's just very like, because my question that I asked like when I was doing that fermentation visualization was like, how are me and my boyfriend's like long-term goals, like how is that gonna like work out, or like what do I need to do to kind of meet that? And then I received that very specific like Pelican retort breaking. And of course when I did this meditation with distillation, I wouldn't have had an answer to that because everything happened like a few days ago with like all of those goals that we had literally didn't mean anything, went right out the door, and everything just, all of our goals just changed within a few days, and now we're like on a completely different track that feels great. So it's just like, it's interesting.
Is that what you said the last time, that it kind of represented to you to like let go, or like just to be flexible during the process?
Yeah, totally. And yeah, like both of our goals like this week, like Monday, have shifted, and just kind of opening to everything. And we just made some little calls here and there, and now instead of moving, we're getting our landlord to pay for house damages and stuff like that. You know, like it's just like, oh, okay, that's great, we don't have to spend all this money, you know. Things like that. So but other than that, I really do not have an amazing, profound experience.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, for me, the fermentation was really difficult to connect to. But this distillation, I felt much more connected to. Because I think also it also depends on what you're actually experiencing in your everyday life, or what you're actually going through in your life. But yeah, for me, the visualization was, I had a similar experience where it felt like the bottom half and the top half were very separate. Like I couldn't connect with my root very easily, and that was very conscious. I had a conscious thought that it was hard to fully open that up, or it was a little bit more difficult to get rooted or grounded. And then, as Analisa, you maybe saw when we first got connected, I was just getting out of the visualization. I was like high as a kite. I just felt so up in the upper triangle, activated, like just discombobulated, like a little woozy, like lightheaded. But the breathing was difficult to push down for farther into the root. Like it kind of just stuck down, like right at my stomach. And I did keep my eyes open. After a while, I noticed a fog between, like in the space in between was foggy, like gray. So everything kind of got more grayed out. And that's something I've experienced randomly during my waking life, just probably going through a fog or a sense of fog, mental fog, and actually just having difficult vision moments, if that makes sense. Like sometimes I just experience seeing like gray, foggy matter. And this time when I was doing the visualization, it was activated consciously. So for me, it confirmed that I was experiencing that type of visual fog. And it would have been a cue for me to do some grounding or to connect with spirit or source. But, you know, when you're like going about, you've got your day job and you're doing work, it's kind of hard to just stop and connect to the veil or like work on the veil. But so that was good for me to see. I guess it was a validation. One thing that I first started off taking note was that there's a moment to thank the vessel. So the vessel, the glass jar that I had been carrying the water in the whole entire time, I got the thought to thank it, just appreciate it for the work that it had done, because the vessel itself also was playing just as much of a role as the substance inside. So I had a moment of holding the glass jar and just thanking it and appreciating the work that it had done. And I guess, yeah, those are kind of my experiences from what I have written down. What about you, Analisa?
I really like everything that you said about this chapter, because I feel like thanks to you summarizing distillation, I kind of can actually make more sense of what happened in my meditation, because I felt kind of similarly like I wasn't getting something or connecting all the way to the process until I started hearing like this through your words, and then I was kind of like, oh, I'm experiencing all of that stuff. But I think it's that thing of like, when you're in it, you're swimming through the fog or the veil in that way. That's kind of hard until you have space, because I feel like I'm in this process right now in layers. But I did my meditation with the burning away of the water on August 14th. I looked at it on my phone so I could figure out how long ago it was, because I knew it was kind of a while ago. And I posted it in my stories and sent the photo to Evelyn, where it was like, it looked like the moon. It was a full moon, and you can't really see it on here, but I was left with what looked like the moon to me, and I was like, that's cool. But I tried to meditate with the distillation happening, and it was really hard. Like, I felt frustrated. I felt like I wasn't centering. I felt like, and now like reading the chapter over, like I felt all of those things that he kind of talks about in terms of not really feeling like this spiritual groundedness. Like, I felt really like I've been in a funk pretty much since Leo started, and it was the Aquarius moon, and I felt all of what that stuff kind of was feeling like. And then I did my open eye meditation in the living room where I had candles lit and it was dark, and I have that big portrait of myself as a skeleton on my wall, and I just felt this pull to stare at it, like into my own eyes as a skeleton, and it freaked me the fuck out. Like, I had this whole, like, my heart felt like it was racing. I felt like I was, like, the painting was like one of those things that like the eyes are moving and like following you around, and it felt like it had this own life to it, and it scared the shit out of me. Like, this painting of myself as a skeleton, like shaman woman, was like haunting me, and it kind of brought up this like other mortality feeling, and I felt really frustrated and bothered that it was putting fear into me. So I went through this like frustrated feeling of not feeling centered or spiritual or grounded, and feeling like very disconnected from source, to staring like what felt like mortality and death like in the face, and feeling really freaked out by it. And then I redirected my energy away, because I didn't know what I was getting out of it other than just more existential fear. And so I just started staring kind of out into, I kind of started scrying with my wall, if that makes sense. Like, it was just like a blank wall that was kind of lit by candlelight. And so I just kind of I was thinking about my acid trip, actually, that I had shared in the last meeting, of like how all those snakes and skulls had come through the wall. And I was like, I wonder if I could activate my brain on my own to that extent, and I couldn't. And I was like, it's probably good that I can't. But I started hallucinating and just like seeing lights and things that I kind of already normally see. And I did experience like nausea and frustration and exhaustion and just kind of this like disassociative, like I felt like I wasn't, it's that thing like when you're meditating, you kind of lose track of time and you just kind of get lost. I felt like I just got kind of lost for a while. And then when I felt like I had exhausted myself, I kind of brought myself back down and was just like, I cleaned all my stuff up and was just kind of over it. And that was my experience. But after that process, like, and us talking about this chapter and me rereading it today, I'm realizing that what got ignited in that, I do feel very cold and unemotional about a lot of things right now in a way that normally I would have a lot more empathy for. And I feel very irritated by things that are normally things that I would have a lot of feelings about. And so I think that maybe that's a byproduct of the work, because I feel like this fire and like the Amazon fire, I'm feeling a lot more detached about a lot of issues that people are having in their lives. I'm feeling very detached about, and not that I don't care. I just feel like that more like bigger thing of, we don't know what is going to come out of this. We don't. And I also like had this thought process where I was just like, we talk about displacement, and it's like every civilization that exists has displaced something. Like every single thing that we consume, that we eat, that everywhere that we live has displaced something. And it's like there's so many forests, so many animals, so many like cities, so many cities that have fallen and then been washed away and then rebuilt, that I just kind of have this like existential blowout of the world and like time cycles, to where it's making me feel very detached right now. And I feel like with your synopsis of this chapter, I was kind of like, oh, that must be like part of the distillation that's happening within me right now. And it actually made me feel less worried about how I feel right now. I guess I'm like, why do I feel so dead inside? So that's like my experience, I feel like.
That was actually one of the questions I was going to ask you guys for distillation, because the one thing that kept popping up for me throughout the past couple of weeks, without even having read the chapter yet, was this worry or fear of not being my childlike, happy-go-lucky, or optimistic self. Like, there's been so much of emphasis in my own subconscious to try to get back to a time where I was more like fun-loving, or like playful, or comedic, or like just in a sense childlike. And my question was like, are you guys worried that going through this process that you'll lose your sense of humor? Because that's one thing.
The opposite. I feel like I'll probably gain my sense of humor the more detached I become. Like, I feel like if anything, I kind of need to stop carrying or holding as much space in such a serious way. Like, I need to lighten up. So I feel kind of like that's my polarity experience of that question. I keep getting that message too, like that reading in Palm Springs, like one of the cards animal totem cards I pulled was the hummingbird, which I see those all the time. And the symbol for that was joy and lightening up. And I feel like I'm constantly getting that, like, need to detach and kind of take things less seriously. But I know what you mean. Like, if you get too detached or too cut off, like, will you retreat and be like isolated forever. But then I just think you end up like Don Quixote, where you're just like the madman, you know, like you still laugh, you're laughing to yourself. You're like
Mhm.
I
guess,
love them.
like,
I love Don
maybe
Quixote.
when I was younger, it was coming from a place more so of hysteria versus like any sort of grounded knowing, because this comes up for me. This has been coming up for me too, which is like the pure joy of ignorance, or the like the innocence of naivety, that once you pass that point of no return, that you kind of, well, which is like the Virgo into Libra hood, or the Leo into Virgo ness, which is relinquishing that like kind of sense of childishness and moving into a more serious, structured, like work ethic, and being more like consistent and detail oriented, looking at the details and the facts more. That that energy has just been with me the past like couple of weeks, but verbalizing all of this has been helpful for me, like for you too, Analisa, to understand that, oh yeah, duh, we're going from Leo to Virgo. And then that is what I love about this whole experience, is that there's no connection to anything. Like, oh yeah, that's the sun's moving into Virgo. Yeah, so I'm feeling that and it's going to change. And then I'll feel the next phase, and then I'll feel the next phase, and I'll feel the next phase, and to not be attached to any of them, because it's ever changing and it's always evolving. And so these phases, like having non-attachment to these ideologies or theories or philosophies or cultural experiences, because it's going to change. It's always going to change. Like that's the only constant thing to reality in any way, is that it's always changing, which is the third law, or the third principle, is nothing is ever static. There's always constant motion. The vibration, everything is vibrating and changing and shifting.
Well, that's what I like too when he talks about his trip, you know, and he's saying how if it's not us that does what we're supposed to do, it's not a big deal, because something else will come and take that over. And I think about that all the time in terms of like energy from a scientific perspective never goes away. Like from what we understand, it's just always there. So it's not really a matter of whether or not it's within us or if it's out there, it's going to go somewhere. And I feel like, you know, I always think about the dinosaurs too, like, you know, that energy is still here. Like they're not here, but there's energy within that. There's some kind of imprint of the past. And I have a lot of dreams about the past. And, you know, we were talking about dreams, and one of the things that you talked about in the beginning of the book club that I was thinking a lot about, because I always have these dreams. I'm always trying to figure them out, but I'm always like in a mall or a shopping center, and there's always old stuff. And I'm always going through all these relics of like past decades. And part of me just associates it with the fact that I spent like the first 10 years of my working life in resale clothing. Like that was a job that I had. So I just feel like it's imprinted in my subconscious to like constantly be picking or stocking or shopping or going through things. But it's happened in these other ways where I've gotten these symbols that have shown me kind of like how to look at time and how to look at time cycles. And one of the things I was thinking about in terms of us having to like let go of our physical body or let go of our earthly form, but like not also cast evil on it or just see it as kind of like this innocent changing thing. So I was thinking about like that letting go process in relation to our emotional attachment to our physical objects. And I feel like another way that you could gauge how distilled you are as a person is how willing you are to let go of physical objects from the past. And I feel like that's been kind of something I've been really obsessed with. I have this kind of like aversion to the way that part of my family holds on to relics from the past. It really bothers me because it's almost like there's parts of me within them that haven't been able to grow up or evolve when I'm with them, because we spend so much time or emphasis on stories from the past or relics from the past, and it almost takes over the present, where we don't really focus on building those memories in the present. We just focus on kind of the glory days. And I think that's really common within our culture right now. There's a South Park episode where they make fun of it with these, there's a whole season where there's these things called the member berries. And the member berries, everyone's taking like a drug, and they're just basically these little berries that talk about the past and like pop culture. And everybody's like, remember when that happened? Yeah, that was cool. Remember when this? And it's like, they just talk about the past, like, however many decades. But it's true, like we're watching like, you know, BH 90210, like the new 90210 series that came out, and it just feels like that. Like everything feels like nobody's willing to go through the alchemical process of letting things go. And then you have this like huge, then you have all these weird metaphors of like climate change where we're being like forced into it. We're literally being forced by climate change to have to let go of everything that we've built that is materially comfortable. And I feel like nobody, at least in America, wants to do that. And we all post memes, but we're like sitting here still doing all the same cushy things that we want to do that are contributing to the problem. And we're watching ourselves do it, knowing that we're not willing to like let go of these things in this way. So it's an interesting time to be alive. It's an interesting thing to be learning about this process, and then seeing how disassociated we are from knowing how to work through that imminent change, or like our imminent doom. You know what I mean? And then also seeing that doom in a positive way and not seeing it as this negative thing. I mean, the earth needs to balance itself and reset itself. And if we're not willing to move with that, then yeah, like we'll end up in the calcination of the earth that the earth needs to go through right now by our own hands in some way. And I had this thought, I was like, what if that's what we were created for? What if we are actually here to usher in that calcination process, and that's why we're so destructive?
That reminds me so much of what you were saying, that we're going to be forced to change our connection and relationship to material things. It's very Uranus and Taurus, where you have no option. It comes in from left field. There's no way to prepare for it, even if you tried, or you have no idea how to prepare for it. Like me, I bought reusable straws. Like, great. That's not going to help change the tidal wave.
But what happens to the straws when you die? No one else is going to want to use them, and they just end up stuck in something else. And then we have this conflict because we created all these non-disposable items that are more permanent that nobody wants to reuse once we're dead. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like, that's what I think. I'm always like, we're always creating these solutions that inevitably will create a whole different set of problems. Mm-hmm. And we're all trying to do the best that we can, but it's like, it's inevitable. Like, everything is going to end at some point.
Annalisa's going through her nihilistic phase.
Well, I'm not nihilistic. I feel like I'm realistic in the sense that it's just, you know, because I'm doing it too. Like, I'm vegan. I buy all the reusable stuff. Like, I switch to everything when it's, you know, supposed to matter and stuff. But it's like, I'll sit and I'll ask myself, but like, what happens to this when I'm gone? You know what I mean? Or like, what happens to, like, what is this going to do in like 50 or 20? Like, we don't know. We're all just reacting. It's that emotional reaction thing that we're talking about. Like, we're all just kind of jumping from one stone to the next, hoping that we'll figure it out. But I think we don't know. Like, we really don't. Mm-hmm. Oh, Kathleen's now frozen. I wish that would be funny if that was what really happened. Anyways, I'm not meaning to be a downer. I'm just saying, like, I think about it in that, like, the dream sense of what I have, where it's like the relics, like we're about to be relics, like time goes by so fast and everything we're doing now will be a relic. And I feel like we don't have the foresight as a species to really get in front of things in a real way, you know, like we just kind of react.
We're not unified enough. And that's a whole point of connecting to the collective consciousness, is so that we can all be unified enough and on the same level enough to work towards a solution for the future. But we can't do that when everyone's so divided and polarized, and we're working off of the two-dimensional realm of existence, which is me and you.
Right.
Polarity and duality, which is a hermetic principle, but yet it isn't the only existence that we can function off of. There's 6 others that are there and exist. But we are heavily focused on the duality portion currently at the moment. And it's so destructive to function on a dualistic polarity existence, obviously, because what's interesting, this conversation reminds me a lot of of the Zeta Reticuli, which is the gray alien species. They have an origin story that's very similar to what we're going through currently, which is very Martian. And Mars, Aries, Libra, the opposite polarity, me, you, warmongering, all that good fun stuff. The Zeta Reticuli were in such a state of polarity that they essentially killed themselves off, or they, like, their energy functions on a Martian level. And some say that a lot of people are immersed with that energy within them, the Zeta Reticuli Martian, like very fiery, heroic, like destructive energy inside. And that's really what kind of elevates the you versus me thought process. And through this whole alchemical process, we're learning how to disassociate from that, disassociate from the ego having any sort of separation from anyone else. That the ego, yes, exists because it allows us to exist in this physical self, because we are contained within a vessel, yet our spirit, internal, intuitive self is connected to everyone else and everything else. We just live in this illusion that there is a separation between you and me, and that we are functioning in a polarity. And that's an illusion. It's something that, it's not an illusion, it exists, but we put too much weight on it. And that's just the part of where we're at as a whole right now. And that's just the reality of that. We're just there, you know, like we just found out about photography like 100 years ago. We just found out about photography. Think about that. We just learned how to capture
with the dreams, like the relics of the past, like the dreams that I have. Like that's exactly where my brain goes. It's like, this is all, like, our technology and our discoveries are still so new.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the fact that we were able to replicate reality almost just as accurately as it is, the way that our eyes perceive it to be on a piece of paper, is a discovery from the 21st century, essentially. And we're replicating reality from the way that it is perceived to each individual on a continual loop with movies and TV and media and receiving it, and we're not realizing or learning how to consciously receive other people's replication of reality that they see it, and we're getting immersed and confused by it, thinking that that is reality. Anyway, that's a whole other topic too. But going back to the 7 alchemical steps, because we're starting to wind down towards the end. But yeah, I appreciate our side conversation about humanity and where it is and where it's going, because that connection to time is so important. And that's what he says, Dennis William Hawk says in his experience, a distillation experience, is that when you're above this space, you're able to see how linear it is down here. That time is so horizontal in the way that it functions. And we, like this picture that I have up on the screen that I'm sharing, reminded me a lot of his experience of this energy pattern going through a loop. Like that is more so how energy flows, is in this figure 8 pattern, and it like bends over itself and it goes back and then it forms a loop. And that's kind of the way that I always visualize energy moving through the body also. But then that's not 2-dimensional or 3rd-dimensional. It's multi-dimensional in the way that moves, because you can go up, you can go down, you can go back, you can go forward. And that's one thing too that I visualized as well. Well, when I close my eyes during that experience, then I shot through and had more visualizations, rather than keeping my eyes open. But when I close my eyes, then I like visualize like flying really high up into the sky and experiencing lightness in that way. But with my eyes open, connecting to physical things and physical manifested like solid or semi-solid material, it was a lot harder to merge the above and below, or the in and with, and the within and without, through my visualization process. It was like it was existing out here, but not immersed, which is probably a good thing. That's probably like when you've lost it, when you're out there living in the mountains.
Maybe. I don't know about that, but maybe that's because I'm out there more than I was.
Yeah, I think ego was helping to keep me contained in that moment. It's like
that happens to me though, where I have to like catch myself and remember like you don't want to go that far. It was like me like seeing if I could tap my brain into hallucinating at the acid trip level, and I was like, wait a minute.
Right.
Probably good if you don't do that. And I was like, because my brain does do stuff pretty close to that already, and so yeah, I don't want to lose it completely. I don't want to live in that reality.
Without knowing how to get back first.
Yeah, well, right now I'm mostly experiencing what I think is kind of related to this chapter, which is why I'll bring it up, is the circulating the light. And he talks about relationship to light in his trip, but I've had, I remember the first time it really started happening, I had texted you about it because it was a year ago on 4th of July that I experienced my first experience with seeing light in the conscious state, where it was like I could do all this and kind of close my eyes, rub them, and keep looking, and it was still there. And now that's pretty frequent, and I see a lot of different types of light, and a lot of my brain, I think, in this state, this is also sometimes called the imaginal state, that in-between state. And I feel like that's been activated for me through this process, and especially with a lot of the other mystical studies that I've been doing and meditations I've been doing, it's activated. And once that is more prominent in your life to the point where it's just kind of happening, like I get why it's really important to have like a a container or a studied practice, or why even doing like a shaman plant ally kind of thing is almost safer. Because once your brain is like, I had this other meditation with a different, I don't think it was this book, it might have been this book, but it was in succession with another practice I was doing, and I was given a visualization of a door and a rainbow going to the door, and the door was just, it was just black through the door, and what I was told was, once you go through, you can't go back. And I just went through it. And then I remembered, that reminded me, one of the parts of my meditation with this one that I didn't mention was that when I was meditating with my eyes closed, in between looking at the painting and then opening my eyes and scrying with my wall, and I like asked to receive any wisdom or messages, the only thing that came through was this really annoying, repetitive song that was, "It's your time to shine, shine on." And it just kept saying, like, "It's your time to shine, shine on. It's your time to shine, shine on." And I was just like, okay. And it was super, like, made me feel like I was going to go to, like, a hippie commune or something. And it wouldn't stop. It just got louder. So I was like, okay, enough of that. But I thought that was interesting with the light stuff, too.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's a good thing to bring up too, because that moves perfectly into the next chapter, which is working more with the light. Really quickly, I just want to recap on everything. Calcination. Calcination is burning. I just have really quick keywords for association purposes, because I'm realizing that I don't actually remember every single step off the top of my head yet. So calcination, burning. Dissolution is dissolving or melting. Separation is filtering. Conjunction is combining. Fermentation is waiting, letting it sit.
Dying, to the death card. Yeah.
Yeah, letting things, I guess, settle to the bottom.
Poop.
Okay. Distillation is dissolve, and then coagulation has yet to be seen. So coagulation is the last step. It's the last step of this whole entire process. I don't know what we're going to do with the things that we have left over, honestly. You know, maybe it'll come to you throughout the last coagulated step. Maybe you'll have a moment of inspiration. Maybe you'll use it. Maybe you'll just bury it. It does say during the distillation process that we are to use or utilize our old selves in order to feed our spiritual child. So it is like you're creating a separate self from yourself, where you are now feeding, you know, like the pelican. Let's go back to that picture. Feeding your own child self, and nurturing that spiritual child within. Very Leo to Virgo, now that I'm thinking of it. Because that what the Virgo is of service to others, and you being of service to your own self or your own child self is to do what you will with the remains of your higher self portrait, that you originally thought was you, but actually was a physical egoic manifestation of you, but although still relevant to the whole process, because it's going to be fed to your child self. So however you see fit to do that, whatever creative process you come up with, that's totally yours and yours alone. I don't know what it's going to be, but remember that it should not be to serve ego. It should not be to prop up the ego in any way, but it should be it should only serve to heal the self. It should serve only to, you know, the Hierophant. card. It should be used to heal any wounds that you have surrounding your child self in any way, because it is essentially a chapter that we've kind of walked away from. So I know you guys are creative. You'll figure out a way to utilize your old selves for yourself. So in coagulation, the birth of the new consciousness requires embodiment. So what this coagulation experience is going to be is visualizing the new subtle body or the new vessel that exists in the in-between state. So you're creating a self or a vessel, an energy box, essentially, kind of for you to float around in between here and the other. So this is like for you, Analisa, a vessel to utilize so that you can safely travel into the furthest reaches. So you can go into this space and know that you're protected in this third dimensional realm, and also the alternate realm, like your Orphic egg. That's what we are essentially creating through visualization, visualizing the light. And the process is explained in chapter 17. So when you get to that, he will have written out a way for you to do that. So, and he also has a meditation for how to dematerialize. So he has it written out. Coagulation is going to be a pretty big chapter to experience. So just give yourself enough time. Maybe read the chapter this coming week, and then read it full through, take notes with your logical mind, and then come back to it with your subconscious mind and skim through again, and then do the meditation. And that probably will be on the new moon when that happens. Let's see, actually, when is the new moon? I should know this.
You said it was August 30th, I think. I thought it was September 7th or something, but I must be remembering it wrong.
Okay, let's see.
August 30th makes more sense.
So, yeah. August. I think it's so confused. Okay, 3, 6. It's at 6. Yeah, okay. August 30th. Yeah. So on the 30th, which is next Friday, might be a good time to do the coagulation meditation. But again, it's up to you. Or on the 30th might be a good time to work with your old self, transitioning from Leo to Virgo, with the theme of nurturing the spiritual child. A new moon ritual geared towards nurturing your spiritual child within, with the remains of your old self. And then the coagulation meditation is an experiment, so whenever you have time or feel called to, we'll be fine. So, do you guys have questions about anything? Comments?
No, that sounds great. I'm excited for this next chapter.
Great.
Meditation. It looks pretty nuts. It says here, I do want to add, the aspirant should memorize the emerald tablet and repeat it for the coagulation meditation. So that might give a little bit of a heads up, anybody that watches this, that we are going to try to memorize the emerald tablet for coagulation.
That's a Good point. So I'll have to write it down. For me, it's writing. I have to write it down like multiple times in order to memorize it.
I wonder if the act if we wrote it down every day. If all of us decided to write the Emerald Tablet down every day in some form until our next meeting, what we would experience.
That's another side project you could do along with this.
If it tickles your fancy.
Yeah, if you happen to have the time or incorporate it with your daily practice. Because, yes, memorizing it is advised, I'd say.
I feel like I'd be a badass if I could be like, oh, the Emerald Tablet at any time, at any social event, and just, you know.
I used to do that when I was a kid, remember passages for fun. Did you guys ever used to do that?
Movies. I was really into like doing that kind of stuff with movies. Yeah.
I was really into memorizing Alice in Wonderland poems.
That's amazing.
That was fun. So I'll think of it that way when I'm writing it down. Okay. So sounds great. Oh, I didn't send over the distillation thing that you wrote out, Kathleen. I'm really sorry. So I'll do that along with this video for people to read up on. Kathleen wrote out the whole distillation experience that she had, and so I'll send that over, or I'll also include it in with the distillation video on YouTube, like copy and paste it underneath and have it there as well. Or I think you can also upload files. However, it'll be available for people to see. And the next meeting is in 2 weeks, which is on the 5th of September. So 2 weeks from now, we'll meet up. And as always, you guys can check out the YouTube page and ask questions or make comments there. And I, or maybe Analisa or Kathleen, maybe if they happen to see it, might comment. But also Instagram is the easiest and fastest way. And yeah, also we're taking suggestions for the 4th book for the Esoteric Book Club. It is going to be geared around esoteric astrology. So we're going back to astrology. It's going to be a little bit more linear brained. It's going to be a little bit more academic for people who are studying, practicing astrology in any way. So it may not interest everyone. It may interest some. We'll see. But that is what the next book series is going to be. And yeah, that's it. So thank you guys so much. I love all of you. And
Thank you. Love you guys. Thank you.
We'll have a great rest of your night, and I will see you all in 2 weeks.
All right. Good luck.
Bye. Good night. Bye.